Hey everyone, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today we are hanging out talking about Soul Wars by Josh Reynolds. And so I have my guest here, Kenzie. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Cool, yeah. And just like we did with Black Talon, we're just hanging out talking about the different Black Library books regarding Age of Sigmar because they don't get a whole lot of coverage, and I think that's a shame. So, like I said last month, for the first one we did Black Talon First Mark. I think that was C.L. Werner,
No,
maybe?
that was Andy Clark.
Yes, Andy Clark. My bad. Um, but yeah, so today we are going to go tackle Soul Wars by Josh Reynolds. And I'm just kind of playing around with my audio and visual here. Someone tell me if you can hear and see us okay, and then we'll just kind of awkwardly stall for time until we get into there. So, as I'm going to do with everyone who does one of these reviews with me, Kenzie, tell me just a little bit about yourself. Give me like the 30-second rundown of what you like about AOS.
Uh, so I'm still a relatively new hobbyist. This is like my first completing my first full year here.
Yeah.
And I like AOS a lot because it's still relatively fresh as a universe, so it's pretty easy to kind of get into it.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as following all the major lore and everything like that.
Sweet. Okay. And hi, I'm Doug. I have a YouTube channel with a few videos by Age of Sigmar. Check them out. And people gave me the thumbs up for audio and stuff like that. So we'll move straight in. So I like to start these off with a non-spoiler review. We are going to spoil the entire plot and cool things that happen in Soul Wars by Josh Reynolds. So up front, non-spoiler review. What'd you think of it?
Um, I think it's definitely a lot better than Black Talon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna flat out say just because I don't know, I like throwing shade on other books. But um for however I will say that the plot itself is not necessarily the draw. What's the draw is kind of like the larger implications for AOS,
Mm-hmm.
and just the general kind of like themes of it, of all the contrast between order and death specifically.
Yeah.
Um, and it also has a lot of like interesting kind of character moments,
Mm.
even though they're not always focused on specific characters like all of the time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a lot grander kind of narrative. It's a
Yeah.
very good one though.
Absolutely. I see some questions coming in the chat. Hold on to those. Zombie Man, I'll answer your question towards the end, I promise. Um, for my non-spoiler review, I would say um, it's an incredible book for the dialogue. I love Josh Reynolds' dialogue. He just kind of does characters, I think, very well. He's not, I don't think, an action writer. At least not his strong suit. Consistent action scenes back to back. But I think he did a great job of setting the tone of this kind of current, I don't know, era, whatever we want to call it for AOS.
The Soul Wars arc.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
a anime fan, I'm used to referring to things in arcs.
yes, absolutely, yes.
Or
It's
if we're going a more Dragon Ball Z route, the Soul Wars saga.
yes, the Soul War saga of the AOS arc. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, no. As far as like the non-spoiler review, I think it's a good book. I don't think it is like a New York Times bestseller that's hidden, because no one wants to read nerd books. But it is a very good book for getting caught up on kind of current events, I suppose.
Current events.
And yeah, so that's all good stuff. So at this point, I'm gonna say spoiler zone. Um, don't go tread any further if you don't want the plot of Soul Wars ruined for you. So do you want to do the quick rundown, or should I?
Real quick, I do want to mention,
Go
like,
for it.
as far as when you mention current events, I'm thinking about or what is it? I'm thinking about Forbidden Power, which just came out.
Yeah.
There is kind of like a little bit of a relationship to it because of the whole 10,000 tombs thing
Yeah.
that is like a big plot element, like almost a MacGuffin, but not exactly. Within the story, it's kind of like it functions similarly to a Stormfall, I would say. So it's like even in this new era of forbidden power, it's still relevant, I would say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And of course, thematically for the big
Yeah, I mean,
broad-reaching themes, it's still
so
very relevant.
yeah, absolutely. Because like the thing about forbidden power is it's the aftermath of the necroquake. The necroquake is the first like 2 chapters of this book. So
No, it's like the first freaking 5 chapters. Don't you try and sugarcoat it.
there's a lot of buildup.
There's a lot, like that's the nice way of saying it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go the harsh route. It is a slow start. Very
yeah.
slow.
We'll
Not the
get to that.
slowest, not the slowest thing I've ever read, but definitely a bit of a wait.
Okay. And one other thing I forgot, we did just literally just discuss this before I turned the camera on. Basically, so in the book, I'm kind of curious as to when in the design cycle for AOS 2.0, or even just the design of the Sacrosanct Chamber models for the game, this came out because they used different names for stuff. Like, was it Mage Sacristan, something like that?
Did you listen to the audiobook?
No, I
Or
read it, so I don't know how to
okay,
pronounce
okay,
it.
because I was about to say, I was like, I sure hope you read the audiobook because my with my accent, I'm definitely gonna like, butcher these kind of
Mage
names, like
Sacristan.
Mage to Kristen,
Yeah,
Mage
but
Sacristan,
that is
Mage.
functionally a knight incanter, and then
Yeah, it's an incantor.
what
And then
was
the evocators were referred to as Celestors, which kind
yeah,
of sounds pretty cool. Pretty
it
cool.
does, it does.
Fits with
So
the retributor kind of theme with the
mhm.
paladins.
So I mean, it could be something like that specific chamber has this like nickname for stuff. It never really explained, but it was just kind of like a what are you trying to represent, and you kind of figure it out over the course of the book when they explain what they're doing and how BA they are they're doing it. So
Yeah.
um, moving into the actual plot here. So as Kenzie pointed out, the first 5 chapters is kind of this. It goes from like the macro story to a micro story, and so the macro is Nagash is doing his big ritual that's going to like subjugate all the realms pretty much instantly, kill everyone, suck their souls in, and that kind of stuff. And how the Skaven interrupt that. There's a lot of fun details about the Skaven just getting in there and messing stuff up, and even just their presence is a corruption to the spell. Nagash tells off all 4 chaos gods. I think, well, at least 3 of them. Uh,
There's a bit in there where he's like, did this happen before?
yeah.
So if you're looking for some references to the old world, they are definitely there,
hmm
and like I can kind of tell. It's funny. It's like, did
Uh,
this?
yeah. Anytime I do a video that has to do with like the Soul Wars narrative arc, someone's like, "Didn't Nagash learn his lesson?" I was like, "Yes, but he doesn't
No, he
remember
didn't.
everything."
No,
He's
he
like, "This
didn't.
kind of seems familiar." It's like, no, he never learns his lesson. So
No, he didn't.
he does the ritual anyway. Things get destabilized. I really do like the description. So it goes from Nagash inside the Black Pyramid doing the spell thing, and then it kind of zooms out and it gives you a few glimpses of what the Necroquake functionally does across the realms. So there's one where it's like a carriage and overload guy who's plundering like a crashed ship, and all the crew in the
Mhm.
ship
They
suddenly
start like
come. Yeah,
rising, yeah. My
they,
favorite one was it was in the second chapter, I
okay.
think. It's this Slanesh Lord, this immortal
Yes.
Slanesh Lord who's like hanging out, doing his like thing, demonettes are crawling up around him, and he's like, I'm getting real bored here. And then all of a sudden here comes all this kind of necroquake stuff rolling in, and then he thinks, oh, well, this is gonna be
Yeah.
ravishing.
This
Like,
sounds legit.
and I can kind of like hear Jack in the back of it. It's just kind of like I can hear the voice of Jack from Real One saying something like that.
That's funny. So yeah, it just kind of like gives you glimpses all across forever. At the same time as that is happening, because it does take 5 chapters, because we keep going from that macro story to a town called Glimsforge in the realm of Shyish, and it's a order city. It has a realm gate that goes from Azir straight to there, and it's built atop a giant tomb called the 10,000 Tombs. And the idea is, we don't want Nagash to have these undead to like make an army just instantly, basically.
Well, because they're like really powerful kind of like entities. There's like big warlords and tyrants and all sorts of like big kind of scary undead.
Yeah.
That's what's under there. At least it's alluded to.
Yep, absolutely. And so the idea is you have this city that's built to defend this tower to make sure Nagash can't get to it. At the point of the Necroquake happening, all those little subplots that we talked about go down, as well as things go ballistic in the 10,000 Tombs. A bunch of what we now know as Night Haunt pop up. The Stormcast guards are fighting them off, and one character, a Lord Castellant, I believe.
Yes, Lord Castellan.
Ferris Thom, that's how I'm going to pronounce it.
Yeah.
But he dies and is shot back to Azir in a bolt of lightning. And at this point, things get really, really awesome. This is where I thought stuff kicked up. So now we have two stories. We have the story of Ferris Thom, the soul that has just been departed from his body. And then we have the defenders of Glimsforge. And how those two things kind of weave in or out. So Ferris's soul goes to Azir. He's put in they actually go through a lot of detail in explaining like how the reforging process works, why it doesn't work so well. It sounds creepy. They put you in something called a soul cairn, which is just like a lockbox.
Big kind of like a big silo full of
yes.
Well, okay, the most disturbing thing was when the mage sacristan her name, I'm just gonna call her Miska because that's her name.
There you go.
She, after the whole like stuff goes down with the Necroquake, she's going around kind of like with the spirit flasks. And like all these kind of rogue spirits that are trampling around his ear, she just goes over to him and like opens her little flask and just kind of sucks them in. And I kind of want to spoil a little bit of the ending, but with the spirit flask, because like it proved just kind of like how crazy they can be, or what kind of thing is inside there. At the very, very end, they beat up the Guardian of Souls, which is a Night Haunt hero. And she goes over there and she just, pulls him in. She's like, "Oh, this is a good one." And to me, I was like, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, it's super creepy. So Ferris Thom is in the Soul Cairn. We meet our hero, I guess.
Yeah, I call him the main character.
Yeah, sort of Balthus.
Central character. Balthus, Aram.
Yep.
Aram.
And there's some kind of interesting threads that are dropped about him and his backstory. We'll cover that when we come to the end, because people who love the old world will recognize this character in some form or another. But Balthus is part of the Sacrosanct Chamber, which they are introducing to us in this book. And they're dedicated to trying to preserve and protect artifacts of power, and then also discover a cure to the problems that come with reforging. Why we keep losing pieces of ourselves and that kind of stuff. So he is on his shift basically to go to reforge people. He stands at this big anvil, and they reforge. They give new bodies to people. Stormcast, I should say. Ferris Thom's soul comes up to be given a new body and be reforged. And that is exactly...
And Necroquake.
Yes, exactly. And Necroquake.
That's exactly when Necroquake happens.
And the soul goes ballistic at the influx of death energy. And he's screaming and he's howling. This is the soul of Ferris. Just spoiler. But he turns into this fractured lightning geist. Like this monster made of lightning. And just tears apart Azir. So... not Azir, but the actual anvil of apotheosis.
It's the anvil of apotheosis.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it's called.
And so there's a scene where a bunch of Lord Arcanums are trying to pin this dude down. At the same time, the entire structure is rupturing because the Necroquake. It's a big wave of energy. So Sigmar boosts himself up to be Super Saiyan. He's holding up the walls.
And he holds up the ceiling.
I know, yeah, and all this fight's going down. It's so cool. Ultimately, the soul lightning geist that is Ferris Thom gets chucked out into the void, basically hurling through space. Soul is lost, and at this point, Balthus goes on a sort of a pilgrimage. They realized something happened. Something came from Shyish. We know it's Nagash. We don't know what he did. But we're going to send some Stormcast over to Shyish to, investigate. Balthus wants to go because he thinks that's where Ferris's soul went to.
He feels personally responsible for the loss of it, so he's like, Ferris Thumb, I will find
I
you.
gotta get him. I gotta get him.
Very, very dramatic.
Yes.
Kind of like.
Very good. And so this is where our story kind of diverges again. So we have Balthus going to Glim's Forge to set up defenses and do some minor investigation, try to figure out what the heck has happened. The other arc that is far more interesting, and I wish that we had seen more of it, is Ferris Tham's soul gets pulled back to Shyish. Nagash sees it in the sky, plucks it out there like a meteor, and then basically pulls his soul apart, is trying to rip out parts of Azir, like the lightning energy that Sigmar puts in Stormcast Eternals, and turn him into a minion of death in some form or another. They call him a Death Lord, which I guess is technically not. I mean, did you catch that was supposed to be synonymous with a specific model?
No, it's not synonymous with a specific model because, and I figured that out because he later joins up with like three, other quote unquote Death Lords. It's like a White King, there's like this zombie queen lady, and then, a Knight of Shrouds. And they're all considered Death Lords. So I'm thinking it's like just a generic kind of term for like a leader of a death army sort of thing.
But yeah, they basically, it's this cool dialogue, and there's Nagash, and then there's Arkan the Black, and they're just kind of scheming, talking about the nature of gods and mortals. He's like ridiculous. There's like 3 or 4 really cool conversations that you're like, man, I started this book liking Stormcast, and now Sigmar's a tool.
Well, it's definitely it's so the big kind of like, I guess, conflict of this book is not necessarily, like the Stormcast versus the Nighthaunt or whatever like that. It's more like just like the ideologies of Grand Alliance Death and Grand Alliance Order, specifically Stormcast, kind of like rubbing up against each other and not liking it.
I think that's a great way to put it. That's probably the best synopsis I've heard.
And I'll be honest, like there is a great case made for Death. It's like it's almost convincing, but I'm over here like sitting here with.
But then I'm dead.
painting at Stormcast right now, and I'm just like, wait a minute, no. He's really persuasive, but no, that's all wrong. That's all wrong.
No, that's funny. Yeah, so basically over time they through like verbal manipulation, but then also like they just have some stuff that affects Ferris in weird ways, like go ahead.
Yeah, like they put him in some like armor, some like spooky armor that's kind of like kind of keeps him stuck and suppresses that whole part of Azir that's kind of in him, and then they give him the sword, which like is continuously kind of like events to speak to him.
Yep.
In his mind and everything like that. It's
yeah, and then there's also like a mental manipulation where like he feels terrible and he feels tired and in anguish, but when he gets near like the Spirit Torment, who's like carrying a lantern or something like that, like he feels better, and so that's just part of like cementing. Death is good. You know what I mean? Like the further you get away from death stuff, you feel sad and bad, and just kind of like over time, kind of twisting him. At this point,
it's very interesting to kind of see that progression, especially like when he comes into contact with like the other main characters at the end, and it's like, blows your mind.
Totally. And so at this point, I'm gonna. Actually, before I yada yada yada, I'm going to introduce one of the. Was she a Liberator Prime, Callus?
Yes, Callus was a Liberator Prime. Callus Elpine,
she was.
I can't pronounce anything.
No, it's fine. So it's she was a Liberator Prime who had just been stationed at Glim's Forge when all of the Necroquake stuff happened. She was being trained by Ferris Thumb, and so her and Balthus are both at Glim's Forge, kind of acting as the main hero defender duo. They had different tasks, but I mean that's kind of what they're doing.
Honestly, I feel like Balthus doesn't really get there until like way later or something like that. And probably is because like I took a big break kind of in the middle of the month for reading it, and it's like I don't remember him going.
No, I mean,
remember.
At my on my Kindle, it was close to like the
The midway
forty
point,
percent.
actually,
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
it's probably because like the chapters are so darn long.
yeah. They are pretty long.
So long.
And so we're gonna this part is kind of a yada 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 where it's like now where Ferris Thome is doing this trip from Nagashazar to Glimsforge, and he has a few we'll say training exercises along the way where he gets to be a death guy and kill people. And Glimsforge folks are rooting out evil within the city and fortifying it as best as they can.
The scene where he joins up, Balthus actually goes with a Lord Veritant, which is like this kind of inquisitor type
Yeah,
guy. He goes with him to kind of root out some stuff in there, and I remember that scene. It was really cool.
yeah, that's a
Bit.
necromancer, right?
Yeah, they go and find
Yeah,
a necromancer, and he like turns into this big kind of flesh shoot and everything like that. It's like
yeah.
it's like a mech suit, but it's made out of like
That's exactly what
zombies.
I was. I was like, oh my god, it's dead guy power armor. This is incredible. Like, but he just took a bunch of zombies and like had them like reform into be like Hulk body Iron Man
I'm
suit.
invincible.
Exactly. Yes. Nothing can penetrate
Uh,
the dead bodies all around me. Um.
oh wait.
So
Yeah,
that was cool
that
stuff.
was really good. Yeah, but
Um.
yeah. And there's also the Hammers of Sigmar are also there, but I think the reason why he's there is also to have someone that Balthus can contrast with in that kind of like
Agreed.
midsection of it, and they can kind of like explore who he is a little bit more, and also to have a reason for there to be the Hammers of Sigmar in the box set.
Well,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
seriously. If you in the Battle of Glen Swords is also the story of the box set, and
mhm.
I never read the pamphlet, but it's in there. It exists.
All right.
There's also a bit in there.
I believe it. So, we do the yada yada yada. The forces finally come together, and there's a pretty long assault of the city. And I'm not going to go into like a ton of detail because it's a lot of fighting, frankly. But what happens basically is their ultimate mission of the Death Side is get to the 10,000 tombs and unlock it, get those dead people out of there, raise an army, and then Ferris, you're gonna. My assumption
Go
is
break through the
lead.
realm gate and go to Azir.
Exactly, yeah, and do a little
Yeah.
checkmate action right there with an army right at the doorstep. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that was kind of the idea. There's some epic fight scenes. We were just talking about an evocator who goes like full John Woo action movie style and just decimates an entire like section of the Death Army because he was rolling
So
really
you
hot.
say you say John Woo action scene, and I'm gonna be honest, he really did have this kind of like Asian mystic kind of vibe to him, even though
Yeah.
I think it was more like kind of like Casanova feel because he's like, ah yes, I must finish my poem.
Yes.
I
Yes.
feel like he's more of that kind of like European kind of charmer, but also because of just the very I don't know, it felt like a kung fu movie. Yeah, it kind of did.
Yep. So yeah, awesome, cool scene at the end of it. Balthus gets to face Ferris Thome again, so they go to the city. The city gets absolutely just rocked. They get just totally annihilated. Not
Now,
like
I actually
go
did
ahead.
read this section recently, so I
Okay,
can actually go through it in a little bit of detail.
go for it. Yeah, please take over.
So essentially, how it all works is that the city is heavily warded with all sorts of like Azerite prayers and everything like that. So it's hard for the Death Army to get in. Except it turns out the Knight of Shrouds that's leading the army. His name is Melendrick or
Hmm.
something like that. Yeah, Morgan Melendrick is a really cool name. He when he was alive actually destroyed part of the seal around the city out of like kind of like anger because he didn't get the glory he was promised, because the Stormcast stole it.
Yep.
Um, and left kind of like a breach in the wall for the Death Army to they later exploit to get through the city.
Hmm.
The Hammers of Sigmar are there at that gate and actually get broken through. So there's a bunch of fighting in the city with a bunch of like mixing of the Stormcast, like the
Hmm.
animals of the Helmhammer, and then like the rest of the Hammers of Sigmar. That fails, and so eventually they fall back to this big old temple that's called like the Grand Tempestus, which is like the big Sigmar shrine, which is the most heavily warded thing. they force all the refugees inside and then fight the good fight outside, and eventually, and it's a combination of like Free Guild and um, Dispossessed and Stormcast, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Um, and then eventually they all fall back inside and they think around for a moment. They're like, okay, we're all stuck in here. What are we gonna do? And then eventually they're like, wait, I got it. Let's go into the catacombs. It'll be great. And so they all go back into the catacombs, leaving this one guy, the Evocator Prime, to kind of stall the Death Army,
Yep.
and somehow he does. And the Knight Incantor even says, she's like, "Wow, he lasted a lot longer than I thought he did. Wow."
I know, yeah. It is an evocator with full sets of rerolls on hitting and wounding, and then also does the electric shock thing.
Yeah.
Both are
He
higher than
he
force.
he stores up this kind of like electric shock thing and goes right for the spirit torment and just blows him up. It's excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
And then eventually he goes toe to toe with Ferris Thom and just kind of like, bolts on
Melt.
back to his ear.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
oh wow, wow, that happened. So, they go down the catacombs and all sorts of stuff happens. Ferris Thom gets down there and he's like, I've been here before. Starts chasing folks around there, and then he's like, "Oh yeah." Balthus, he runs across Callus and is like, "I know who you are," and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Um, she does a good round with him, and then eventually kind of like skedaddles once Balthus shows up, and they do go toe to toe, and that's kind of like the end. And
Yeah.
that's the Battle of Glamsforge, everybody.
So in the end, the city is preserved. I mean, well, it's not much of a civilization anymore, but the good guys, I guess, win ish.
Ish.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty rough victory. I mean, like in the sense of death didn't accomplish their goal. It was a minor win, if we're gonna go with game terminology.
A Pyrrhic victory.
Yes, he took the minor win because, yeah, I mean, they got rocked pretty hard.
To me, I got the vibe where it's kind of like it was kind of setting up that Soul Wars box set. It's
Hmm.
because the Hammers of Sigmar guy was still kind of out there,
Yeah.
and so is the Knight of Shrouds and everything like that. Unfortunately, like all the other Night Hunt heroes got at some point. The
Hmm.
Lord Executioner went first, which is sad because she was the best. Um, she was the best minor character in that entire book. The Soul Torment, I mean the Spirit Torment lost to the big Evocator Blast, and then eventually the Guardian of Souls got sucked into a flask, which is a terrible thing.
Yeah. No.
It's
Yeah.
terrible. Even for a Night Haunt, it's just like, oh, that's. Hopefully he'll give me a good three mortal wounds on that one guy out there. I don't know.
Totally. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right before I take the 3 mortal wounds myself. My gosh.
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, so there's still kind of fighting out in the city proper above
Hmm.
ground, but the they did a good job of wrapping up the plot within the book very concisely, which made
Yeah.
me
I mean, yeah, they effectively broke the back of the Shyish army. So I mean, that's all you can really hope for, I guess.
happy.
So that is the plot. Let's start off with what you liked. What did you like about the book?
I'm gonna be honest. We missed
Oh, go for it.
a really interesting part of that whole thing where the character of Elia, the
Mm-hmm.
little 10-year-old kid who's running around the entire time. So, um, I think that well, that's probably one of my more favorite parts of the book, if only because she draws a really good connection between a bunch of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the thing that Ferris kind of like holds on to from his past life. He's like, why do I remember this little girl? Why? Um, and she's very critical and leading everybody through the catacombs
Yep.
because she just kind of knows it. Because cats. Um,
Yeah, cats are the real hero, and there's none in the box.
it's true. It is true. And then the whole kind of there's a whole thing where that Reynolds alludes to a lot throughout that whole every time she's kind of mentioned almost where it's like, hey, her mom got to buy like some death things and tried to attack,
Mm-hmm.
and then Ferris like destroyed it, and that's oh no. And then it turns out that Callus, the Liberator Prime, was Elia's mother the entire time.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. I'll get to it later, but there's a ton of characters in this book, and
It is
Elia
true.
Elia makes a really she thinks she's important because she is not only a plot device towards the end to help us
Yeah,
get to our resolution, but
yeah, all right.
she she does connect Ferris Thomas, who she introduces to first, and then she meets Callus on her first day, and then through those two, like, is able to just kind of affect the plot. So she kind of acts as a good, like, there's a lot of people going on, but as long as you know everyone who knows Elia, you have most
And then
characters.
you got it. Because I think he also she also I think runs into Balthus at some point. Yeah,
Yep,
she runs
yep.
into Balthus at some point. So yes, everyone, and I would say that the four characters you got to keep track of is Balthus, Ferris, Callus, maybe, and then Elia.
Yeah, that's. But
Callus, maybe.
they named so many other characters. Okay, so
Oh my God. Everyone in the no, the throwaway characters in the beginning with the 5 chapters where
hmm
where they're building up to the necroquake. Yeah, they named all them. Okay.
yep, yeah, it
There's
was a little bit of overload
lots of
there.
named characters.
Um, so what are some things that you liked?
Anyways,
Yeah,
I
no
like
problem.
kind of like the that connective tissue between all the major characters. They actually really did have a whole lot of they had a whole lot of really good kind of character to them, even
Yeah.
though it wasn't very um, explicit.
hmm
It was just kind of like, yeah, yeah. Especially the Balthus had a definite kind of like growth as a character, which is very key to a good story. And
Yeah.
So did Ferris, but in the opposite direction.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which which again is a really good through line for a book because which I think we missed a lot in Black Talon.
Yeah. No joke. Um, for me, as far as stuff that I liked, there's just a number of scenes, and I feel like Josh Reynolds, he knew the story he wanted to convey about the nature of chaos and sorry, not chaos, death and order, like you said before, and I think that he just picked some really incredible scenes to demonstrate the magnitude of both factions and why they are, in their minds, totally right. So stuff like my favorite thing was being in the Sigmar of Bolum, where the Anvil of Apotheosis is, and everything's so grand in scale. And then to see it all fall apart with the Necroquake, it was just a really cool scene. I felt like I was on a roller coaster ride. And then
Night, babe.
huh?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I was saying, but saying that to my mom there.
But then contrast that with when Ferris is. Stone actually mentioned it in a comment there. But when he's walking through Nagashazar, like he sees like the incredible also magnitude of what death has to offer at his home, and so yeah, no, it was all incredible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And go for it.
So yeah, I mean, I think the part that really gripped me the most was that kind of climax part where like the battle actually started going on, everything like that. I was kind of glued to the page, but mostly because I had to. But
Yeah.
um, it was what I like in a book,
Yeah, totally.
and the rest kind of felt I guess like unremarkable, just mostly because that plot took like a big backseat, and it's just kind of like
hmm
here's some like good stuff for you to chew on, like as a philosophically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you have anything else that you liked you wanted to bring up?
Let's see. I mean, I thought the for as much as you said the action was kind of like I thought it was fine.
Oh yeah,
It was
no, I disagree.
fine. Yeah, no, it's fine. It was I guess what I liked about it is that it did a good job of weaving character into the action.
That's true.
Where typically, it kind of takes a back seat. They did a good job of like incorporating some dialogue and some character in there. I go back to that whole Ubicator Prime thing. So it's like he's hacking through all these night hunt, and Fair's just trying to talk to him, being like, saying all of his death stuff that he said like a good 1,000,000 times at this point.
Yeah, I know.
And the Evocator Prime is like, wait, hold on, I'm almost done here. I'm almost done doing this thing. Ah, there we go. Okay, now we can talk.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, there's some really cool stuff in there. I think dialogue is definitely the strongest point of this book. I mean, the action's not bad. It's not. I mean, I've read Space Marine novels that were
Yeah.
exceedingly worse, like
Yes.
just bad.
Yeah,
But
no.
I don't know. I liked when I think about action stuff. I really like the last fight in Black Talon
Oh yeah,
as
versus
a
the Uncle Gots. Yeah,
yeah.
that was pretty spectacular. The first chapter was also pretty darn good as far as the action too. It's like when
Right.
she's fighting through all the Zinch guys. That was pretty excellent. I
So
think Andy Clark does beat out Reynolds as far as writing the action there,
mhm.
but Reynolds beats out Clark and everything else.
Oh.
I'll go that far.
Okay. The opinions displayed on this channel are not those of the entire. I'm just kidding. No, but yeah. But I guess what I'm talking about is what I liked about is just these specific set pieces where high level concepts are really well conveyed through dialogue, and not just dialogue, but like the actions that characters do. It's with that. So anyway, it's worth reading. What did you not like about Soul Wars?
um, Nagash.
What?
I hate Nagat. Well, okay, and when I say hate it, I'm gonna be honest. He's it's like I hate him in a good way.
Okay, so he's a
It's
good
like
villain.
yeah, he's a really good villain because I like so sternly disagree. He's so well written to the point to where I can like be like try and get into like a big argument with him.
Yeah.
I feel like I could actually go toe to toe with him and be like, now, here's the reason why Sigmar is our Lord and Savior.
That's funny.
um, yes, but at certain points, just kind of hearing him prattle on, I was just like, okay. One
Mm.
thing that I probably do need to rag on is especially reading it in like a big kind of big block,
Yeah.
big blocks of time, especially with how long these darn chapters are, is that certain lines of thought, especially with Ferris towards the end. Um, and certain words, specific words, like I swear I saw the word corpuscent like 40 times in the
Yeah.
last like 4 chapters. It was like what? Not 40 times, but enough times to be noticeable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which by the way, corpuscent is a plasma, is like a fancy word for plasma. Um, and then um yeah, it's just occasionally repetitive, especially in the rhetoric of death, which is kind of the point,
Mm-hmm.
but after a point it gets a bit annoying. Also, I have O Stone in the chat is pointing it out. Amethyst glow, crackling with his ear lightning.
Yep.
Yeah, there are certain phrases that do kind of get repetitive, but
Yeah. He got a buck every time he said one of those because they wanted to,
yeah.
display the new Hextrace flame paints.
Well, no, no. There was no like. Well, they did say balefire a good amount of times, but there was
Yeah,
no
that's
real
more what I
like.
was thinking is Bellfire.
No, yeah, but they did draw a lot to like amethyst glow, and there's no like shiny. There was no shiny like purple paint, which was a bummer because I was painting purple ghosts. I was like, okay, hold
They
on.
shine with a druky violet shade.
They do. Hoarfrost, yeah, that's another good one.
Yep.
Um, but honestly, as a writer myself, you know, a little bit. Um, I do also find myself getting like where I want to use certain phrases. I use certain phrases a lot. I don't. I'm
Mhm.
trying to think of one of my quote unquote tropes. I don't know. I can't think of one right now, but mostly because I haven't written in a while. But they
Yeah.
exist.
Oh, I
I
mean,
know it happens.
this has
It
been the thing
happens.
that's plagued Warhammer literature forever. Because if you read the End Times like books, like in order, you'll like if you give yourself $1 every time someone said like he had this upon his brow, it would. I don't know why that phrase "upon his brow" was just like we got to nail this home. I don't know. So yeah, I totally understand.
It is a funny thing to look for if you want to.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'll be honest, his verbiage is very his vocabulary is very well developed, and I enjoyed it as a
yeah,
higher level kind of reader. It's like, yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah.
yeah. And what I find is it's not just like so his the word choice is very good. Like his
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary is good, but also
Mm-hmm.
just the because you can have good vocabulary, but you can write out narrative that sorry dialogue that doesn't seem natural. But
Oh no, his dialogue was very, very.
yeah,
It had a very natural flow to it, and it was very kind of like snappy, especially when a lot of
hmm
the Stormcast were going back and forth between each other. Just like, especially when it came to criticizing Malthus.
yeah. I mean, yeah, they were super good about that. I was more thinking like Ferris, like when he's tired and weak, trying to come up with like logical arguments as to why death is bad, and then Archon the Black just in his superior form in that moment, shutting them down very, very easily. I don't know. It just seemed very believable.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I really did feel myself kind of like thinking, it's like, you know what? I can kind of get behind that, but not. And
I
I was
like
like,
the cut of this guy's jive.
well, no, actually, I really did. I did enjoy the character of Arkham the Black, if only because he wasn't so like he wasn't as annoying about it, I guess. He was
Yeah.
just he was very kind of like a chill guy. He's just like, okay, all right. Here's why you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like I could feel like I could go and sit down and have a nice kind of like have like a nice Dr. Pepper and chat with him, but not Nagash. Nagash would just be trying to like subjugate my soul the entire time.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, Arkin would wait
Um,
before that happens.
anything else that you weren't a fan of? I can do mine.
No, no, I think you can go on yours
Okay.
there.
No, for mine it was just there was pacing was a weird issue in the book. I think so. We have all of like the stuff going down with this mega spell in the beginning of Nagash, like literally like binding together. I don't know disparate parts of the spell, trying to like keep this hodgepodge machine going, and then because now the Skaven have messed it all up. And at the same time, we keep flashing back to like training day for rookie Callus, and it's kind of like um, just walking around a bunch of tunnels. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
the brakes and gas pedal of like the tension kind of kept going back and forth. And then they had me like really hooked from like about halfway through the book when we're seeing Ferris turn evil and we're seeing the Necro Quick Rock stuff. And then it kind of like dips down a little bit. We clean up Glenn's Forge and we have a few battles with the Night Haunt, but it didn't. There was this like this kind of slump towards like the 3/4 mark. Then it picked way back up in the end. So there was a lot of like start and stop kind of stuff going on. But also, he covered so much ground in terms of how this affects everything. I don't know how I would improve that.
It's true.
Like
It's very
we
true.
we came up with different endings for Black
Black
Talon,
Talon.
but
Oh
I
yeah.
have no concept of how to fix that problem because he covered so much.
Well, mostly it's because the ending of Soul Wars was excellent.
Yeah,
Except I will say that it much like Black Talon, it just kind of ended where it's like
we're done now.
yeah, no, seriously, it's like okay, so Balthus and Ferris have this huge like ideological battle. It's awesome.
hmm
And like freaking Nagash and Sigmar like shows up and everything like that. It's Titanic. It's a great climax. But immediately after he's defeated, at Ferris that is, here comes Callus, here comes Elliot, here comes his Griff Charger, and
Yeah,
they're like, yes, everything was fine.
exactly. Yeah,
much like Black Talon, where it just kind of like cuts. That's
yeah.
it.
I mean, the fact that we saw those characters alive is still more than we got from Black Talon. 'Cause we were just told what's her
Oh,
name's alive. We're like, I don't
no,
know.
no, no. We still don't know what happened to freaking God, we could tell you. We still don't know.
And I guess yeah. So that was a soft thing I didn't like because again, I have no solutions for it. The only other thing that I would say is there was just so many names, like you were talking about, all the minor characters that we meet like in the first 4 chapters, and then really just never hear about later. It didn't need to have names, and then, so
It's
like
true.
halfway through the book, you're on like mental overload of like
Overlord.
who's talking to me right now, and you're like, and then you have to look for keywords like crackling with the zero lighting. Oh, I know this one guy. He was crackling, and well, he's like, I don't know.
He was a cracker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there was just a lot of characters, and I would probably trim some
Um,
of the names.
I'm actually pretty good when it comes to remembering names of stuff. For some reason, I still remember a whole lot about the Stormcast characters,
Okay.
like their names and everything like that. Like I remember the Hammers of Sigmar guy. That was Kenosis. There's
Yeah.
like there's the Halla Knights guy. I actually did forget his name. It was started with a T.
Yep.
There, yeah, no, I kept up pretty well, if only because that's just a knack of mine. But I will admit, it's like, okay, we did not need to name all these people.
Yeah.
But in the especially okay, but I did kind of like how they named the Night Haunt because I actually grew very attached to them. Like I liked them more than I wanted to see a story about those three little misfits rather than Ferris because after that point the point where the Night Haunt got introduced, I was a little bit kind of almost bored with Ferris at that point because his rhetoric had gotten very repetitive.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to know what is going on with that Lord Executioner right there. Please
Yeah.
tell me her story.
She was
I
cool.
think I think the whole jam was that her lover got killed and turned into a Stormcast, and she's very upset about it.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
upset about it.
Um.
It
Yeah.
was fun.
Actually, so on the note of there being too many characters, I will say that like I feel like he made some really cool decisions. I'm off of the stuff I don't like now. I'm just talking about stuff that's in there.
Stuff that
um,
exists.
did
Yeah,
did some
it's
cool
fun.
decisions. So like for example, you had already mentioned that Callus, who is the Liberator Prime, she is strongly pointed to be the mother of Elia, the
I
young
actually
girl.
never. I did not see it coming.
Yeah, no, it's
She
cool.
did. She did feel there. There was like she's like I feel connected to this girl, but I don't know why. I should have
Hmm.
seen it coming, but then it happened, and it's like oh, oh.
Yeah, yeah. So that was cool. What else was there? There was Balthus, who's the Lord Arcanum, who's kind of one of the main characters, one of at least four. Um, he is strongly implied to be Balthazar Gelt from the Old World, who was a master of metal magic. Um, and are you familiar with that character from the Old World?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
Aside from the fact that he was the Metalmancer dude, because and
Metal magic.
it did kind of trip me out because Nagash starts mentioning he's like you were once mine
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Yes, that's how Nagash talks. 100%. 10 out of 10.
Nigga.
So, yeah, so Balthazar Gelt. So there's a cool story in there, like where they're talking about Balthus's accomplishments, basically. And so they were supposed to be like, yeah, he once took down an entire fortress of like bandits or like that. And so basically, how he took it down was he walked up and the treasure that they were hoarding, he just turned it into lead instead of gold. Like he just turned the metal of it, and then they just kind of killed all their reasons to fight. I thought that was super cool.
It was,
Um,
yeah, I caught that. I remember you mentioning it in another stream. I was like, ah, yes. And I was looking out for it and I saw, I was like, aha,
what a
there
jerk
it is.
move!
There it is. There it is. Well, it is heavily implied that like he's quite misanthropic. Like he's introduced and he's hanging out in the library,
Hmm.
like and you know the Hallow Knights, Lord Arcanum is like essentially teasing him the entire time they're doing their whole thing in his ear. He's just like, hey, why don't you open up more and go on the battlefield like me, huh? And he's like, no, I like my book, huh? Um, and it is like they give very distinct reasons why because he's like there's a grand order to everything like that and I need to
Yep.
unravel the mysteries of the multiverse. It's okay, whatever.
Yep,
I don't jive with it, but it's a very well written character, so I can at least like support him in his quest.
totally. So is it what's her name? Rocha?
Oh
Um,
yeah, Roach.
um, her was it her who her lover was a Stormcast or
Yeah,
got
her
taken away?
lover. She lost him, and then she goes up to the Stormcast and is like, "Yeah, you took her from me." Yeah.
Yeah, which was super cool.
It is awesome.
Crazy ex girlfriend level deity.
It's no, it's excellent because and it's really weird because she's kind of like flirtatious towards Ferris.
Yep.
So he's like, "Hey, Rocksha, can you get over there and wipe out that line?" She's like, "Oh, whatever you need, my sweet lord." Wink, except I don't have an eye.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wink, ghost eye. What else? I'm trying to think of other
Um,
character things. So like there was yeah.
Dole was pretty good, but he also got on my nerves after a bit. The
Which guy?
Guardian of Souls.
Oh yes, yes. Yes, sorry, I didn't get your name. Yep.
Yeah, Felgrip was the Spirit Torment. He didn't say anything, but he's just kind of there. He had his own kind of like character. He's just like I'm just here. He's a quiet little Spirit Torment, just like
Yeah.
all right, I'm ready to capture some souls. Okay.
Uh, yeah. So let's see. My next question here was any notes on the writing style. So we're kind of evaluating authors as well as their works. So what do you think of Josh Reynolds having read one of his books?
I'm gonna be honest. It's exactly what I like in a book
Yay.
because and it's and especially in the sections where Ferris was doing his thing, I could see where he used action to kind of blend into the thought process and everything
Yeah.
like that, which is something I know I do when I write.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can see it in the short story I wrote. I don't know, but
Yeah. Note here. Kenzie wrote a short story about was it Sisters of Battle? It's in the link
yeah,
down below.
I am working on a sequel. I need to finish
Boom.
it. I need to finish it. Um, anyways, um, but I really like that because it's as a mode of driving character because it's like one of the things that you can't do in any other medium
Yeah.
is explore that kind of inner monologue and thought process. Um, I don't think they do it as much with like the other characters. The Balthus, I think it's a whole lot of that kind of like spinning off into kind of like what am I thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
Callus, I want to say does it a little bit too. Like all the major characters have a bit where they're kind of like, oh, and here's the thing I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
um, which which is good because it does a very good job of developing that character in a way that is pertains to the medium.
Totally. Yeah. I have in several videos waxed poetically about how I think Josh Reynolds does great dialogue and how that's um, paramount when it comes to these kind of, it's fantasy that might be hard to understand or it's very abstract, but when you bring it down to a concept of what is the nature of order, right? Is order Sigmar's version where everyone has autonomy, or is it Nagash's version where we eradicate evil because everyone's dead? Both are technically order, and so this is a great kind of interplay. So there's dialogue on that side. One other thing I want to talk about though is that he does a great job with describing physical states. So like when Ferris is weighed down by his new armor, it feels heavy. Like he is described in ways where he is like bound, and that's kind of cool. That was good.
Yeah, there's a certain technique to when it comes to word choice that can like by the very notion of the word
Mm-hmm.
conveys a certain feeling. It's like I guess the fancy word for it is connotation. So like you want to use the word like his steps were leaden as opposed to like his steps were heavy because like when you say leaden it kind of like gives a very it like the word itself like has that connotation where it's like oh
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
understand
sound
what they
heavy.
it sounds heavy it's like oh I get it.
Yep. Yeah, totally. No, I thought you
It
did a
does
great job.
it does a good job of really yeah using
Um,
the right words there.
yeah. Anything else about J Ray, as one want to call him now on Josh Reynolds?
J Ray. Oh man. He did some. he did some good job of describing physical locations. Because yeah, I got a pretty good picture of all the places that
Oh
we
yeah.
went. Yeah, especially the Grand Tempestus is probably like one of my favorite locations,
Mm-hmm.
especially because there's a point where he describes it in contrast to like all the stuff in his ears, just like Balthus is standing out at like within it, and he's like, this place is kind of simple, and that it has its own like charm to it, and you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see the difference in the realms through it.
Totally. Yeah, yeah.
Enjoy it, enjoy that.
Okay. And the last question here is, who would you say this book would be a good read for?
Um, I mean, I would dare. I think it's a good book for especially those who are interested in Order and Death.
Mm,
As far as like getting across the current events kind of thing, like if you're a chaos player like and only do chaos, like this there's nothing here. There's nothing really in this book really.
yep.
Um, cause yeah, the main plot is sort of um laser focused on these two grand alliances
Yeah.
as opposed to really being broad reaching, which I think is a current kind of like it's like a thing that's like okay, that's kind of a bummer, but it is at the very least interesting because I play Stormcast as well. But I'm looking at my corner, I'm like, how do they
Mm-hmm.
really? Because for as much as we have a little like tacit thing in the battle tome where it's like, okay, yeah, no, there's a bunch of magic going crazy and Corn hates magic. Let's go hate magic.
Right.
It doesn't, and it does a good job of kind of bringing them into the era. It doesn't really bring them into the era, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
And I feel the same way about destruction for the most part. I mean,
Oh, well, yeah.
there was a
I
Malign
think that
Porn
goes
short
without
story
saying.
where one of the, what are they called? The madcap mushroom sorcerer guy they got
Oh,
from.
the fungoid cave
Yeah.
shaman. There you
He
go.
brought in a whole bunch of like grots and greenskins to go fight in Shyish, and that event is happening during the first few chapters. They're just killing all kinds of greenskins. But that was a cool little tie-in to the Mind Portent stories, but they don't really feature prominently at all.
Mm-mm.
So it is definitely, yeah, I'd say Order and Death players and people who want to
Read a
keep
good
up.
freaking book, man.
Yeah, it is good. I
It's a
mean,
good. I think there is a little bit of a deterrent for just like generic kind of like a general fantasy fan
mm-hmm.
because there's a whole lot of kind of background you kind of need. I'm like, what's Stormcast? What's all that? What are they even talking about?
Yeah, and even if you're just kind of sold on, I guess, kind of the kind of fantasy that AOS is, but there's the gods and the mortals. Like when is talking to Ferris, they talk about like, what are you? You're a tinker toy. Like we use you. Sigmar uses you. Like, and there's this cool like you kind of get in the mind of these almost deity level characters. At least their actions. I thought that was really cool.
hmm Yeah, they for as godly and everything as they were definitely humanized
Yeah.
in a way through that kind of like interaction. Which bums me out because I really, really want that for Alariel, dang it. Because I was like, I need to know what is the Everqueen.
Yeah.
Um, but and so I'm trying to get to Wardens of the Everqueen, I swear, the Realm Gate Wars, I swear. Um, but I just can't.
It's hard to go backwards when they keep announcing new books coming out.
No, yeah, that's it. That's
So
it. And even then, Realm Gate Wars was kind of like I read a few of the kind of short stories in there, and it's just like, all
yeah.
right, okay, it's okay, it's okay. It's not Star Wars level, but
Yep.
it's readable. It's like popcorn almost. You can
Totally.
read it. It's like okay.
Every time GW releases like a new two-player starter set, they have a novel that kind of accompanies it to kind of give you context for the units in the box and also kind of introduce that narrative arc, saga, whatever you want to call it. And I've read the ones for the last two 40K releases and also obviously I did the High Elf and Skaven one, Island of Blood set. There was a novel.
Hmm.
Maybe there wasn't a novel. I'm not sure about that one. But this one, I think it not only conveys what the units are in the box, like to give you context for them, but also sets the stage for just what we're talking about right now in AOS as far as Death being ascendant and Nagash messing everything up. So while it doesn't include every faction, it certainly has ramifications for every one of them.
Yeah, it gets across the main themes of
Mhm.
these of the new era pretty well. And when it comes to defining what is Grand Alliance Death, what is Grand Alliance Order, I think they pull a really good contrast at the end. Okay, that's another good element of the book is that he's very good about contrasting the two major forces.
Mhm.
Um, what I got from it was that order represented hope for the future, whereas death was just like why, why hope for the future when everything can be,
Well, this
you
is
know,
inevitable anyway, so there's no
yes.
point in fighting and striving and trying. Like,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah, it's like I guess it's better can be better summarized as like optimism versus a pessimistic kind of look.
yeah,
Um, if you want to go broad terms on it, it's a fun word. That's another word that's used throughout
it's a
the book.
dollar word. Yeah, inevitable.
Inevitable. But I kind of like that one only because it felt like very, very thematic, I
Totally.
would say.
Do you have any other thoughts you want to add on Soul Wars, and we'll wrap her up?
Um, I, I really like cows.
Yeah, yeah.
I did like there are a good amount of characters in there. It's like I like this. I just have a personal like for it.
Sweet.
Um, um, I know there's someone in the chat who did Raksha, actually modeled it, and
Oh, that's sweet.
my heart goes out to you. I want to see it painted, and I want to see it now. Someone also said that the stories in her stories in Black Pyramid, and I'm like, well, okay, gotta go
Yeah.
read Hallowed Knights now.
I actually was a quarter of the way through Black Pyramid when I stopped to start doing the book club, so it's still there, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to go finish it. But the thing is, it's also Josh Reynolds, and so for the book club, I want to try different authors, at least not do the same 2 months in a row. And so I gotta wait a little bit, but that's all right. Does anyone in the chat have questions for us? And then I will happily answer those. We'll stall a little bit for you guys to get those in, and I'll keep an eye on it for it.
Yes, and I guess what's going on in your hobby life at the moment?
For me, it's all Stormcast all the time right now. I'm doing Vanguard Chamber
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Things I want to do call attention to, though. Like I said before, Kenzie has a short story. You can follow it to the link in the link down below. And so I got Sisters of Battle, and I'm trying to think. There was something else in the tip of my mind that I just said I wanted to make sure. Oh yeah, next month, I put a vote out to the patrons over on Patreon for the next book, and it looks like it's going to be. Oh my gosh, let me get the name right because it's a name I hadn't committed to memory, but it is the Corgus Cole backstory.
The Red Feast.
The Red Feast. I almost called it the Red Hours because I got that short story.
The Red Hour.
The short story book Red Hours is right next to me right now, and I was just like, I know that's not it.
It's like, oh, I love that short story.
So that's going to go ahead and be our next one here. So, question from Gold Bear over on Twitch: what are some good Free People books to read? This one actually has
A
Free
good
People
amount of
in
free
it.
people in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a decent. I mean, okay, I'm gonna be honest. I think largely throughout the book, the Glimsmen, the local free guild, are kind of characterized as like guys just kind of out in it for the money, except for like the main kind of captain general dude who's like,
Hmm.
he's like trying to work with these stormcasts. He's like, come on, man, we can't.
Yeah. You don't wonder why they lose.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, no. And Balthus is over here. He's basically he kind of treats him like crap. He's just like, okay, so you
Hmm.
guys just stay out here and get killed, and I'm gonna go and do all
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. You make a perfect meat shield.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as other ones regarding Free Peoples, the Callous and Toll novels, City of Secrets. I mean, I'm just thinking of stuff with humans. There's not like a Free Guild or Free People like army book yet, so there's not a codified thing. But those are some great ones for you.
Yeah. Soul Wars because it covers such a broad range of kind of I guess for lack of a better term, cultures.
Mm-hmm.
There is a like you get to see that like the actual free guild, and then there's like some tribesmen in Shyish that are just kind of roaming around
Yeah.
trying to survive, which is interesting. There's a mercenary company from
Mm-hmm.
Gur that shows up briefly, which
That was
is
cool.
interesting. That was actually they were kind of cool.
That was in my
Um,
yada 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 section where the forces came back together at the end.
the big kind of like it was just kind of like a first kind of fight thing. It's like, oh, aren't they scary? Yeah, yup.
Mm-hmm.
Time for death to shine before they get balked by the Stormcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But there was a lot of tension in that kind of battle. I mean, the battles between the Stormcast and the Nighthaunt. I was actually kind of like, oh, they kind of
Yeah, you know, it's
really? Are they
interesting.
gonna lose?
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, well, I'll give you a spoiler because I'm working on Forbidden Power stuff. Stormcast can lose.
Oh yeah,
um,
no, yeah.
and so I thought it was a great. It kept that same amount of tension in Forbidden Power. But yeah, so it's cool stuff. If no one has any questions, was there any last things you wanted to add, Kenzie, like regarding anything through the book?
Regarding
But
anything, my evocator that I'm painting on looks really nice.
there you go, done.
I don't know. I think somewhere I kind of want to like in my modeling history, I kind of like want to pay tribute to all the characters in the books that like I actually really enjoy out there. So maybe I'll just have like some random models out there that'll just be like, here's Callus from Soul Wars, um here's Catalia, if you know they ever get a really good kind of model that just like screams, "Oh yes!" Like I'm looking at some of the Warcry stuff, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. I mean, they have that tribal look. It could definitely work. It was a little bit
Yeah,
of little conversion.
yeah, some conversion bits, but that's gonna be a lot of work. Maybe just like a thing to do in case I ever get bored with painting my scheme over here. It's just like, yeah, let's do Animals of Heaven. However, I don't really just for fun, and then like, hey, it's the characters from the books.
Yeah, yeah.
Heart.
Sweet. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for a review of quite a long book, longer than I thought it was when I read it the first time.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I looked at the amount I had to read before this, and I said, oh, it's like I was like, oh no, it's just 6 chapters, and it mounted to like close near 100 pages.
yeah, yeah. It's a tome.
Ugh, it
Um,
is a tome.
but I'm gonna go ahead and just post some stuff regarding our next video. I'll make a video dedicated to announcing it and that kind of stuff. And thank you all so much for joining me. And Kenzie, thank you so much for joining me as well. You're awesome at reviewing books with me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep. And we'll see you all next time. Have a good night.